Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, here is a set of questions to start with to brainstorm before we get into the subject. Well, if I ask anyone, what is the most important issue that concerns the whole of humanity these days? What do we know about it? How do we know about it? And how does what we know about it affect us as individuals, as groups, and societies? Well, the most salient issue that the whole world is concerned about these days is coronavirus. It has started as a virus, a simple virus, become an epidemic, and ended being a worldwide pandemic. We know about it from the mass media, of course, from all types of mass media, old and new, print, broadcast, and digital. After this introduction, I will move to talk about the media and our perception of the coronavirus pandemic reality. Well, our perception of the pandemic is to a large extent based on the mass media. First of all, let me say a word about the way we tend to perceive social reality these days. Yes, I'm saying these days because things have changed. Because the way we make sense of reality depends on the means of perception we use. And the means of perception we use depend on the historical context in which we are. Now, our perception of the world nowadays is more visual than ever before. We have all converted to the visual sphere, not out of conscious choice, but out of systematic and subtle compulsion. The screen has replaced the scene, as Baudrillard said, and visual representation has replaced real experience. Mediated discourse shapes our knowledge of the world. TVs, tablets, smartphones, computers, laptops, you name it. They all have become the most valued properties and everyday tools we have. We see the world through them. We connect with our latest news through them. We reach out to our relations through them. The amount of time we spend on them exceeds the amount of time we spend on any other activity. Second, before we can understand how the media shape our perception of the coronavirus reality and whether the media simply reflects or do affect reality about coronavirus, we need first to be able to understand whether the media tell us what we need to know, what we want to know, what we don't want to know, or what they want us to know. Something to remember very well. Not enough knowledge about the hideous nature of coronavirus pandemic increases uncertainty. And as our uncertainty increases, so does our anxiety. And with it, of course, our need for orientation and for reassurance, and which we oftentimes seek in news media. Now, I will move to talk about media coverage perspectives and the coronavirus pandemic. What I mean by this section is that there are different media ways and styles of coverage. And here I'm going to give you a list of possible media coverage perspectives that we do encounter nowadays with this overwhelming mediatization of the coronavirus. From which angles of vision and with what intentions do the media tell stories about the coronavirus pandemic? What tools do they use? What impacts do they have on audiences? Actually, the crisis has driven different media to adopt different perspectives in their coverage, depending on their agenda, depending on their objectives. And the following are 8 of the most preponderant, recurrent news media perspectives that we may come across these days. The first perspective is that of objective reporting, objectivity. And here, it's not impossible that we come across some objective reporting, focalizing news more than comment, focusing on updates, evolution of the pandemic in terms of numbers, infected cases, deaths, recoveries, and so on. The evolution and the discussion about finding cures in different laboratories, worldwide laboratories. And of course, doing this without getting into opinion-oriented reporting. So here they just rely on credible and expert sources like the authorities, medical staff, laboratories, and so on. The second perspective of reporting is the orientating reporting. Through this perspective, the media lead citizens through the crisis by continuously giving them advice, instruction, grounded alerts, not just haphazard alerts, assistance, counseling, updates, clarifications, maintaining contact with the authorities, and so on. So in other words, this kind of perspective reminds us of the social responsibility function of the media and the public service function of the media. Now, the third perspective is that of the biased reporting. And bias is the opposite of neutrality, and impartiality is the opposite of distance. Some media purposefully embed their coverage of the coronavirus pandemic with prejudiced and racist messages and implications. And here, allow me to mention some names. Fox News, for example, it called the virus the Chinese coronavirus. And here they're like echoing Donald Trump's statement of it as the Chinese virus. Another example, which is a little bit more shocking, is that of the German broadsheet Der Spiegel. Der Spiegel is like very famous for its serious reporting, for its serious analysis, and so on. And unfortunately, it has recently shown a cover page with some racist insinuations. The fourth perspective is that of what we can call in general as misleading reporting. Reporting that is not based on any facts or evidence whatsoever, that is not based on any credible sources. Now, a lot of misinformation and fake news are circulating nowadays on coronavirus, particularly on social media. Taking advantage of people's confusion and uncertainty, a lot of posts share false information about infected cases, about different types of cures, and so on, which pushes both the authorities and some official media, outlets to react in a certain way. For example, Moroccan authorities have reached sources of misleading news and arrested them. Media TV, for example, devotes a whole section in every news bulletin to debunk some of the false news presented in social media, such as Facebook. Talking about Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg says that Facebook is taking harder line on coronavirus misinformation, taking some measures, so as to filter, accurate from inaccurate information about coronavirus, because things are very, very serious. Now, the fifth perspective is that of sensational reporting. Sensationalism is not misinformation. We have to make a distinction between the two. Sensationalism is, we can talk about sensationalism even if the event is real and true, something that really happened. But the way it is reported is meant to jostle and provoke audiences' sensations and emotions more than their analytical and critical intellects. Now, a lot of news on coronavirus, unfortunately, exaggerates certain statements, emphasizes certain descriptive mechanisms, overuse of certain metaphors, idioms, rhetorical questions, addressing audiences directly like this, more than addressing the issue, in fact. The aim is always to arouse public appeal and excitement, not help people to think critically and make sound decisions on their own. Another perspective is that of the politicized reporting. And here I recall John Meacham. John Meacham is an American political scientist who states, just yesterday, just April 4th, that coronavirus has become a partisan pandemic. partisan, that is belonging to a certain political party, depending on which channel you are watching. For example, a big number of media analysts may consider that US mainstream media like the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, even ABC have made the coronavirus pandemic a political opportunity to wage attacks on the Trump administration for, first, underestimating the danger, second, for not taking the necessary precaution measures to prevent and limit the spread of the virus in the USA. Other outlets like Fox News, for example, Fox News, on the other hand, is considered as a right-wing, conservative, pro-Trump. It responds by calling the current wave of criticism of Trump as coronavirus impeachment scam. Remembering, of course, the last attempts of the Democrats to impeach the president. The channel also calls what is happening, the criticism as media delusion, as a part of blame Trump game. Now, I will talk about a seventh perspective, is that of the strategic reporting. Exploiting the crisis to achieve other ends. It can be economic, it can be strategic. We all know the embedded media messages that reflect the ongoing strife between world economic powers such as the USA, Europe, China, and so on. Bearing in mind the unprecedented falls in prices of petrol because of the dramatic decrease in demand and because of the disagreement between big exporters like Saudi Arabia and Russia. There is even another type of reporting that we may call hysterical reporting. Now, imagine with me, under shock, media reporters may project their own fear and shock into their stories. And of course, through their stories, into the masses of readers and viewers. They may exaggerate, for example, the risks and threats of the problem, or they may even exaggerate the shortage in certain medical or household supplies. Well, intentionally or unintentionally, they create what is known in social psychology as mass hysteria, as collective obsessional behavior. We have seen examples of these. Images and videos of shoppers panic buying have quickly traveled across the world and driven large masses to follow suit and shop irrationally, almost in every corner of the world. Where does theory meet practice? How do the media shape our opinion and perception of reality concerning the coronavirus pandemic? Now, from a theoretical point of view, public opinion and perception of reality are shaped in two complementary and concomitant ways: agenda setting and news framing. Now, for agenda setting, McCombs and Shaw, 1972, assumed that what we know about the world is largely based on what the media decide to tell us. According to them, the media decide for us and tell us what we think about or what to think about. And to do so, the media deploy a set of strategies. Some of these strategies are the following. First one is putting the story in the opening section of the news bulletin. If it is a TV, start with it as the first story. If it is a newspaper, put it on the front page. If it is a magazine, put it on the cover page. The second strategy is that of long coverage. The amount of time should be considerable. The third one is the frequency and repetition of coverage. And the fourth one is that of extensive elaboration. So here it's like you talk about the issue and story from different perspectives. You invite people, you invite experts and talk about it, and so on and so on. This way, the media make an event prominent and salient, and accordingly, by dint of public heavy exposure to the media, the elements prominent on the media agenda become prominent in the public mind, of course. Now, click on any news channel, turn on any news broadcaster, log in any news website, consult any of your social network groups. All you find is coronavirus. When I started Googling up information on this subject on April 1st, I got 9,830 million search results, nearly 10 billion results. I mean, articles and posts on Google that include the word coronavirus. So just imagine with me like this. Also, there is an overwhelming amount of posts, likewise posts on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, on other social networks. Now, coronavirus is not only the first story, it is the story. It is the only story on the media these days, the only story in our minds these days. Coronavirus is all we think about and all we talk about. It has become our major concern. It has affected our personal and social routines of domestic life, modes of interaction, school, work, you name it. It has even affected our language and discourse and conversations. We talk about it, and everything we talk about, we have the coronavirus issue in it, in any conversation, in any dialogue. It's even in our jokes and in our anecdotes. Very often related to agenda setting is news framing. Well, if agenda setting tells us what to think about by deciding on what issue is important, framing tells us how to think by deciding on what attribute is very salient in the story. Agenda setting is about what story is narrated, whereas framing is about how the story is narrated. Gameson, 1992, defines framing as a signature matrix of condensing symbols, catchphrases, taglines, exemplars, metaphors, depictors, visual images, and reasoning effects, which journalists often use, through a process of selection, emphasis, exclusion, elaboration, in order to guide readers and audiences in general towards a very specific interpretation of the story. Leingard, 1991, draws a very interesting distinction as far as visual framing is concerned. He draws a distinction between episodic and thematic framing. Episodic framing depicts concrete individual cases, like personal stories, while thematic framing depicts events in general context that can be national or international. Now, how do the media frame stories on COVID-19 and coronavirus? Depending on their agenda, different news media use different framing strategies to narrate stories on the pandemic. Some of the most frequently used ones are as follows. First one is the use of discursive packages of words such as fear, anxiety, terror, panic, death toll, death, killer virus, fatal disease, fatalities, suffocation, contagion, epidemic, pandemic, and descriptors like insidious, contagious, deadly, dangerous, ravaging, devastating, the unknown enemy, and so on. The second framing strategy is that of the use of specific visual effects. And these visual effects center the red and black color most of the time. There is also the use of images of hospitals full of infected cases, full of sick people, images of empty streets as well. The third framing strategy is that of, very recurrent strategy is the audio effects, the use of some framing audio effects, which, audio effects used to echo the liveliness of everyday life, especially nightlife, night hustle, music, concerts. Now these effects focus more on ambulance horns breaking the silence of streets and city halls. The fourth framing strategy is that of highlighting numbers and curves. Remember that numbers very often speak louder and stronger than words because they inspire a lot of accuracy and a lot of substantiation, especially if they come from credible, reliable, and scientific sources like medical experts, like official authorities, study centers, academic institutions like universities, and etc. The fifth framing strategy is that of breaking news. And I'd like to stand here a little. Well, breaking news, very often there is no harm in it. In the first place, breaking news represents the signaling function of the media. It's one of the normative functions of the media. The old alert color is always framed in garish red and in bold characters, makes audiences give up whatever they're doing and focus on the latest news updates, which often leaves an immediate resonation of fear in their psyches and also in their minds. The sixth framing strategy is that of episodic depiction, portraying stories of particular individuals fighting COVID-19, for example, especially celebrities like Tom Hanks and his wife, remember, some soccer players, media anchors like Kumo, the famous CNN reporter, even politicians like Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister of Britain, and his health minister, for example, Iranian politicians, and so on and so forth. Even stories of ordinary citizens getting infected, or not even getting infected, but getting socially or socio-economically affected by the pandemic. All these examples do impact people's perception of COVID-19 and coronavirus situation, reminding everyone that the next one might be any one of us. The seventh framing strategy is that of thematic depiction. And here, portraying the pandemic in the general national, regional, or global context, relaying the evolution of the pandemic, for example, in neighboring countries and at the global scale. And this is, of course, very likely to have a more powerful and massive chilling effect on people around the globe, framing the pandemic as the great equalizer, as I mentioned before, as the world's most sweeping devastator, which has not spared, which has spared no one, even the most powerful countries. All these frames and strategies tell audiences which attributes and which descriptors to use while making sense, trying to interpret, trying to construe meaning out of the COVID-19 situation and the coronavirus situation. I will talk a little about the debate. There is, in fact, a very stern debate on the role and the performance of the media in the corona pandemic situation. And this debate is animated between at least two poles. The first pole is comprised of some professionals and experts who assume that media institutions and their reporters are doing their job. They're doing their job towards citizens the way they should, providing them with the necessary information, connection, orientation, everything they need in this dire situation. For these apologists, journalists and reporters are working on the front line around the clock, and their work is just as great and commendable as that of medical and security staff, because they themselves, reporters, they too are risking their health and lives while carrying out on-the-ground investigative work. They rely on authoritative and credible sources, they consult experts, they double-check before they disseminate news that is accurate. Now, on the other hand, there are critiques, and a lot of critiques, that accuse the media of being too exaggerating, too overreacting. Some critics among media practitioners themselves assert that what most media are doing is disingenuous reporting. Misleading reporting, in order to attract views, and likes. An Irish columnist asserts that sensationalist claims and scaremongering headlines have in fact littered the press for months, and it is clear why for this person. It is to sell papers and attract clicks. This line of thought considers coronavirus and the pandemic as an absolute goldmine for media, which have exploited people and especially their fear and uncertainty and eagerness for news to sell them whatever, especially if this news that they sell them is fueled with sensational frames, and because they believe in the old media axiom: if it bleeds, it leads. If it bleeds, it leads. So there must be a spice of sensationalism to attract and to appeal for audiences. This way, according to media critiques, media disserve rather than serve society and wreak additional havoc and damage on it, besides the damage and havoc that is already inflicted on it by the pandemic and its social, individual, mental, psychological repercussions. By doing so, they have, journalists, with or without intention, instilled a collective spirit of panic and urged desperate citizens to act irrationally. I recall again images and videos of masses of insensible swarms hysterically pushing into shops and into shopping places to hoard groceries excessively, emptying shelves, fighting over toilet paper rolls, leaving destitute and needy people without anything to pick, without anything to buy. Images like these have, in fact, reminded us of our abased and low nature in extreme situations like this. Bottom line, to conclude, the media have not created coronavirus and COVID-19. That is almost a certainty. Yet, the media have created a picture of coronavirus in our mind. They have determined our consciousness of it as the only thing that matters. And above all, they have determined our self-consciousness in front of it. Whether the media have been sensible and balanced, or insensible and hysterical and imbalanced in reporting about the pandemic, remains yet to be settled. As long as the situation is still unraveling with too much grimness and too little hope, the media are the only window we still have to know what's going on out there. I would like to end with this media literacy-oriented reminder. In fact, there is no better time for media literacy than this. We are witnessing the decline of print media and the unprecedented revival of visual media, broadcast and digital. We are more glued to our screens than ever before. We are more information avid than ever before. Whatever we believe about coronavirus comes from discourse, particularly media discourse. Therefore, we have to be wary about this. We have to equip ourselves with the tools to make good sense of the situation, to make our perception of the knowledge of reality sound, accurate, balanced, moderate, and sensible. Can we do that? I believe we can. How? First, by being aware that there is no agenda-free media outlet. This is number one. All media outlets have an agenda and they work towards it. Number two is not believing anything we hear or we see until we double check for accuracy. Number three, by consulting other sources, by looking at the thing from different perspectives. Number four, by making sure our sources are credible and authoritative. Number five, by looking for truth at the crossroads. Not believing this and not believe in that. Truth is always in the middle. Truth is always at the crossroads. The media literate person is the one who can formulate their own truth. Synthesize from here and from there. Consider the matter from different perspectives. Number 6 is the ability to read between the lines. And last but not least is to deconstruct, to be able to deconstruct and analyze media discourse. This way, we may be able to understand reality. Well, I guess I have said everything I wanted to say. I hope I myself have been balanced and accurate in my analysis. And thank you for your patience, and most of all, feel safe.